This is Real Motherfuckers Podcast, where I, Vanessa Anderson, ask all the uncomfortable questions so you don't have to. Let's do this. So my following guest sent me an email, and I would like to start the show by reading what she wrote to me. I received my daughter's official autism spectrum disorder diagnosis last week, and I have numerous perspectives to share. As part of this diagnosis, it was also determined that she was twice exceptional, which means she's both gifted and needs extra support. I'll also listen to your episode featuring Luana Barajas. I'm so grateful you had her on your podcast because so much of what she talked about matches my own experience with my daughter. She and I connected recently, and I'll just throw in that I'm so glad you did. Although Luana was able to talk about parenting a neurodivergent child from a neurodivergent perspective, I do think it is equally important to discuss this topic from a neurotypical parent perspective as well. Because now I'm finally seeing how you cannot fit a square peg neurodivergent child into a neurotypical round hole. Today, my guest, Sarene Leeds, is here to give us an insight about exactly what she just said to her from her email to me. And I love that you reached out to me to speak about this. Thank you, Sarene, for doing that. And listeners out there, I'm not quick to say no. I think everyone has a story and everyone has a gift to share and for others to learn and connect. And if you're feeling lost or have something that you have to share in this world, please contact me. I would love to have your story on my podcast. So Sarene Leeds, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thank you, Vanessa. I'm so glad to be here. And I just want to say real quick that my name is a variation of the name Sarah. So you weren't wrong.
I know. I was like, before my podcast, I was asked my guests, is this how you say your name? And I told Sarene, I'm like, I don't care if it's John Smith or Laura. You have to know how to say these names. I love your name. It's the first time. I think I've heard a version of it before, but it's a very beautiful name to say.
Thank you. I tell this story all the time. Growing up in the 1980s, when everyone's name was Jennifer or Jessica, it was not easy. And especially, I have a cousin who is 3 weeks older than I am, and she got the name Sarah, and I got the name Sarene. So as a child, I was like, okay, this is weird. What's going on here? But now I was just like, oh, I got the better name.
You did.
I loved it. And now I was just so happy that I have this name. And to mention Luana real quick, oh my God, she is amazing. I am so happy that I connected with her, and that never would have happened if it hadn't been for your podcast. So thank you.
I appreciate that. Yeah, she's my ex-co-host Stephanie's one of her great friends, which is so cool how we all can just be connected in that way. Well,
totally.
You actually, when I contacted you back, I said, I said, well, what do you want to talk about? And so the first thing that you said you wanted to talk about was, what does it mean if your child is diagnosed as twice exceptional or 2E?
Yes.
So let's start with that, please.
Definitely. And I'm bringing that up because I'm still learning. What's so interesting about this particular diagnosis is, like you said, and like I said in my initial email, it does mean that she's gifted. And it's my understanding that it's more of a more recent term to describe what used to be known as Asperger's. And I know that on the autism spectrum, that term isn't used anymore. The reason why I definitely love talking about a twice exceptional diagnosis is because it's still so new, and so many people aren't really educated about that it's still kind of a brave new world for all of us. When I had a meeting recently for my daughter's individualized education program, what's known in special education circles as IEP, they were like, yes, she's autistic, she has ADHD, we understand all that. And I said, well, can we talk about how she's twice exceptional as well? And the chairperson of the committee was just like, well, that's not part of the DSM, so we can't really acknowledge that. And I was like, but we got an official diagnosis from a psychologist, and that's a piece of the puzzle. So, like you said about telling stories, I want to tell these stories because I am in no way an expert. I want people to know that it's okay if if you're just at the beginning of your journey and you're still learning along the way, because that's where I am. I want to talk about these things because it's such a huge part of my life, but I'm learning every day. I am in no way an expert. So the thing about my daughter being diagnosed as twice exceptional is the first recommendation that came out of the evaluation was that the recommendation was that she go to a special school.
Okay.
And that is something that I'm sure a lot of people listening can relate to. We didn't have any sort of private funds socked away for our 8-year-old daughter to go to school. Our plan was for her to attend public school until she went to college. So that initially sent me into a panic. I was like, oh my God, does this mean she's not going to be able to function in a public school setting? Are they not going to be able to help her? And so at this moment, what's really interesting is that the public school that we attend, they're of the opinion that she actually doesn't need a special school because they believe, and when I say they, I mean special education teachers and school psychologists believe that it might even other her more, because what she needs is more social interaction. And I do agree with that assessment. So we're at this, it always feels like we're at the start of this like brave new world, brave new journey, but we're about to start 3rd grade next week, and she's going to be in what's known as an integrated co-teaching class. So it's a general education teacher and a special education teacher. And what's good about that is, because like I said, she needs extra support, a lot of redirection. She gets distracted very easily. And everyone at the school is of the belief that that should be enough for her, that that is what she needs. And this year is going to be a year of observation. Is this kind of class and is remaining in a public school the right place for her? Do we have to consider in the future possibly having to send her to a special school? And then what will that entail?
Exactly, and that's what I want to pause you for a second because I have all these questions just with the information that you just gave me.
Yeah,
so
please.
what you said earlier, the DSM, what is DSM stand for?
Yes. Hang on one second. I'm terribly sorry. I need to just look that up for you because you know what? It's really embarrassing because we, you know what it is? We interact with all of these psychologists and therapists, and they throw this term around
I'm just trying to. And if someone's
I'm glad
listening,
you did. Of course,
I had no idea what that meant, and I'm like, okay, I want to make sure. When I have someone on that I know exactly what you're saying, because before Luana came on, I had no idea. Yeah. To me, everything was autistic or had these other boxes, and neurodivergent was, I had to practice it. I mean, I know if you heard the episode, I was like, oh, like I had to like stop myself, and it's a new thing, but now it makes more sense that it's a spectrum. Did you find it?
I did.
Okay.
And as I was saying it, I said, I'm going to need to say exactly what this is. The DSM is shorthand for the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders.
Okay.
And it's what mental health professionals use to diagose people.
So it's a manual. And then The other thing I was going to ask was you say that your daughter has to be sent to this special school. I mean, what does this special school entail? What is it? I don't know. I've never heard of a school that takes, neurodivergent children. So can you explain that?
I would love to, because that was just an added layer of frustration, because the person who conducted her evaluation came back to us with this several page document, and we had a meeting with her, but she was just so blasé about a special school. And I said, well, what kind of a special school? Can you even recommend a school that you're talking about?
Yeah, a specific one.
And
yeah.
She couldn't even do that. What she started doing, this is, so what's really frustrating for this particular situation, but I find that this is what happens in every field. There's very little overlap in anyone's job. Everyone is just laser focused on what they have to do, and anything else and anyone else, that's their problem.
Yeah.
So that's how we felt after this feedback session, because the evaluator, her attitude was, okay, well, you wanted a diagnosis, here it is, okay, good luck, here's some recommendations, but I can't really help you moving forward. Because I said, well, first of all, we can't afford a special school, and we don't know where to even start looking. And so first she said, well, there are some legal aid societies that you could try. She couldn't even recommend people who could help us. So then it falls to me, the parent, who is, forgive the term, flying blind, and I have to start doing my own research. So one thing I did do was I found it's wonderful that more people are getting diagnosed now, but then from there are these new niche careers that are developing, because now there are these former special education teachers who have turned their experiences and knowledge into a new role as educational consultants, where they charge $750 just for initial consultation, because they know that there are parents coming in saying, well, we just got these diagnoses and we don't understand what it means. What does that mean for our child? So I found this educational consulting firm, and I was saying, I don't understand. What do we need? Where should we even look for a special school? And I could tell they were being very evasive with answering that question. And I got the sense that I wasn't going to get the answer to that question unless I paid the $7,000 for their full scale support package. So
it seems like they've turned this into a business.
Yes.
And it's not helping people unless you have the money.
Exactly.
So from what I'm hearing is you get your child, and none of us plan for us to have anything more than the ordinary, quotes, in our life. And so when we do get this happens to some of us, where we make adjustments to our lives for different reasons. But it seems like they're really, I guess I do want to hear, they're exploiting families. And that is sad to me that first of all, if for me, special ed and public education, I'm not understanding why they don't have those specialists that can tell you everything there, with those, because that's where most people go, because it's already hard most of us, it's hard to afford life already. Yeah. And then you add the extra layer to that.
Exactly.
So it seems like when someone gets a neurodivergent child diagnosis, it's like someone spins you in a carnival ride and you not know where the exit is. And when you try to find the exit, you have to pay extra money to leave the park so you can see what's beyond it. Yeah. I don't think you're already going through a level of emotions that you get when you get this diagnosis, because you're trying to do the best for your child, and that costs a lot of money.
Yes.
That's what I'm hearing from your story. So
it's a big part. It's a big part of the story. I know you say you don't want to talk. You do want to talk about taboo subjects. Well, the hardest thing for me to go public with has been the money issue, and I'm not going to lie. That's a big part of this.
I would have never thought that. I thought there was more compassion and more insurance that would cover certain, therapies, or, giving, like you said, this consultant. That could be something that, for what we all pay for medical insurance, that'd be like the best thing, right? To like help your children. And I also wanted to ask this question, going back to what you said initially.
Sure.
It's, you said that the special ed teacher and the general education teacher will be with your daughter this year.
Yes.
Will it be a one-on-one with that special education teacher, or is she going to be with other children in that time?
She's going to be with other children. Yeah, I'm glad you asked that question, because so my daughter actually has been in this classroom setup already. They moved her in April, so it was hard, because that's the other thing. There's plenty for us to still talk about money on the money issue, but also the pace. It's so slow. They finally moved my daughter into this integrated co-teaching class in early April of this year, so she was able to spend about 2 to 3 months in that setting. But it was very hard for her, because she was in what was known as a mainstream class for most of second grade, and then she switched into this other class, and so it was still hard for her to get adjusted. I am optimistic that at least for third grade, she'll be starting in that class structure at the very beginning. Mm-hmm. So I think that will help her. And I'm also glad you brought up the term one-on-one, because that is something that, at least in our public school, I don't know if this is the case for other people, they are extremely resistant to any sort of one-on-one help, because it costs money. We have been asking for a one-on-one aid for our daughter since first grade, and they just always flat out say, no, we will not do that unless it's a health or safety issue. And so the setup of the integrated co-teaching class is it's a regular sized class, but as opposed to just one teacher, it's 2. So at least they feel that there's an extra set of hands, which is good, which is what they need. And when we had the meeting this summer for, I have to stop playing with my hair and with my hands. You could just animate an accordion, and I'll go like that.
You know what? I think what people don't realize, if you haven't been on a podcast, and some people are reluctant to come on, it's you relive a lot of your situations when you're speaking about them, and it brings out emotions in us when you retell the story. So whatever it takes for you to tell your story, it doesn't matter if you're fidgeting or whatever you need to do.
Thank you. Thank you. So where was I? I was
the one-on-one teachers.
The one-on-one teachers, yes. So the folks on the special education committee, and one of them was the special education teacher that my daughter had for the last few months of second grade. I flat out asked her, I said, do you think that just a general education teacher and a special education teacher will be enough for my daughter in a class with other children? And she did not hesitate. She confidently said, yes, it will be enough. So I said, okay. And like I said, I don't want to call this coming year an experiment, but in many ways it is, because we really do have to see if we have to continue fighting. You know, I never had advocacy on my bingo card. Advocacy for my neurodivergent child on my bingo card. Yeah.
Well, there's no manual for parenting at all, and you're doing this for I read this best quote that I read this year. It's, don't be hard on your parents like even now, like us looking at our parents, if we still have them in our life, that they're still doing life for the first time, and so are we.
Yes.
And you're at this stage in your life with, you know, a neurodivergent child for the first time in this grade. So I think every year will be experimental, no matter how many ducks in a row you have, because you can line everything up and think it's the best plan, and it might not be. Even if everybody else, and you say that, it doesn't mean it's right for her. So it'll be, it's an interesting thing, right? We all do our best to make it safe and functional environment for all children. And it doesn't matter how much we plan it. It's just, like you just said, it's an experiment. Life is an experiment. So,
yes,
you know, we're just going to have to, you make the best you can with the tools that you have and the resources that you have. I wanted to ask a question.
Yes.
So I have one of an acquaintance of ours, you know, their child is neurodivergent, and he's in high school now, and he comes over sometimes and he hangs out, and it's the best. He's just, he plays so well with my children, and he's older, and it's just, they have the best imagination together, and it's just so fun. We were watching a movie, and there was a scene where a little girl, it's very beautiful, you know, and there's this little boy, and he really has a crush on her, and he goes, me and my friends would never get a girl like that. And I go, what do you mean, you and your friends? He goes, me and my IEP friends would never get a girl like that. And it made my heart break. I said, you know what, hon? I said, there's somebody out there for everybody. Absolutely. I said, and you could get whoever you're, you know, I said, there's someone that's right for you that is just as beautiful or even more beautiful. But my question to you is, just from that frame, it's, how do they know that, like, I remember going to class and being like, I was one less math than the best math, but I wasn't the lowest math, you know, or I was, you know, the best English, but, you know, or in this class I was just middle grade. And, you know, we get in these categories. And how are you as a parent not defining your child by just that part of her? And still seeing her as a whole person? What do you do as a parent instead of always focusing on that part of her, which is a lot of your energy because you want to make her life comfortable, but how do you not have her focus on her just being that way? Do you have something you can say to that? This is not part of the script, but it was something I've been wanting to ask.
Well, you know what? I let her lead the way in that because first of all, she loves Taylor Swift so much. I am so happy that she has found a way to enjoy life on her terms. And so, and it's funny because some might see the things that she absolutely loves as fixations or obsessions. And it's hard for me sometimes to listen. It's hard for any parent to listen to the same thing over and over and over again.
Yeah.
But she started, you know, before the schools started contacting us and saying, you know, there's something about her behavior. She's not paying attention. She's not listening. We constantly have to redirect her. Before all of that, I noticed her love of art, of dancing, her brilliance at science and at math, her exceptionality as a reader. And now she loves Taylor Swift, and from a very young age, it's changed, but she would have different obsessions and fixations. There was My Little Pony. There was Shopkins. There was LOL Surprise Dolls. Now it's Pretty Cure and Taylor Swift. And it is, but going back to the question, it is difficult in the sense that I know that there are more extracurricular activities that she wants to do, and it also brings it all back to the money issue. And because she goes to individual therapy once a week, and because she goes to a social development group once a week, it doesn't leave a lot of time or money left over for the extracurricular activities that her neurotypical friends like to do. So I know that that's something that's hard for her to do. So she does do dance. She
good.
has been doing dance since she was in preschool, but even that she notices, why can't I do 2 dance classes? And so that so it's hard because so much of my parenting is management. I
Yeah.
always say that like I have more than one job, and managing everything that she needs is a full-time job. And especially her executive functioning, she needs constant reminders to eat, to go to the bathroom, to put her shoes on, to go to bed on time, to get up. Like the concept of time and schedule, and this is both autism and ADHD. It's very, very difficult. So
Is it difficult? Is it difficult in the sense that it's hard for her to complete the task, or she just doesn't? Even if there is a rhythm that she does every day, she doesn't grasp it. Is it both of those?
She does not grasp it,
Okay.
even though she knows every day she has to go to school and she has to catch a bus. The concept of time it's amorphous. For
Okay,
her.
so you have to really budget in that extra time for you and
Yeah.
for her to not stress it out. And if you don't have that extra time, that must be rough for both of you.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
So I hope that answers your question about how
Yeah.
do I,
It's a tough one to answer because, when you are trying to do your best with a challenge your child is going through, it's hard not to just focus on that, because you think if you focus on that, it's going to make everything else better, right? It's going to make it more ease up. It's going to help her strive to her full potential,
Yeah.
And I think, I don't know, like it's a slippery slope, because at the same time, is there a point where we say, and I can't say that because I'm not in your shoes. And
Right.
I wrote down, we can, unless it happens to us, we don't understand it until we're in
Yes.
it. Okay,
You
so
hit
that's
the nail
just
right
life.
on the head.
So it's just, unless it happens to you, it's hard to say, well, why don't you do this or why don't you do that? Easy for me to tell you this right now, and that before I say this, that's where I'm coming from. But it's like, where do you just, does she have time to just be herself and not be at all these therapies so she can
Absolutely.
so that, I guess that was my other question. You know what I mean? Because
Yes.
I feel like it's not just neurodivergent children. I feel like our society has our kids, if they're good at something or need help with something, we overdo it where they don't have that time to breathe. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
So I was
see
just
where
kind
you're
of
getting what you're getting at. Yes. Yes. Oh, she absolutely does.
to have
one
her
of-
own words in herself, to have that peace and that quiet to just be herself for a minute.
Absolutely.
And that's so
Absolutely.
important for all of us.
It is so important right now, so we can do this in peace. My husband took her to the park. She loves
nature.
loves that in nature.
That's where it cures us,
Absolutely.
That's where it cures us. I think,
Absolutely.
this is, it's a hard place to be, and what I'm hearing is, that it takes resources to get through this, unfortunately, and it's almost like, where do you choose? Did you have to look at a list? And I'm speaking to someone who's maybe their child has just been diagnosed, but you have these lists of all these recommendations you paid for. How did you choose which ones were the most important?
I'm so glad that you asked that question, because I think my answer will answer several more questions.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah. So everything started with the school. We did not realize that something was up. I was noticing when she was still in preschool, she would stim with her hand. She would just open it, open, close, open, close. And that was initially dismissed by my pediatrician.
So can we stop right there? Because if someone
Sure.
didn't listen to Luana's podcast, stemming means a way to kind of de-stress or is
Yes.
a stimulation release. Is that
Yes.
an appropriate definition? And
Yes,
with her, it's her
stimming.
hands. Yeah.
Yes, it's with
Stemming.
her hands, stimming, yes.
Stimming. Okay.
Stimming, yeah. So everything started with the school, and also a lot of it started, so it's a combination of several things. It's a combination of what I found to be passing the buck, which is, it's both passing the buck and also needing to find someone who specializes in these particular needs.
Okay.
It also has to do with availability and how long the wait is, because that is a huge factor for anyone who has a neurodivergent child or has a child with specific kinds of needs. The wait is a huge factor. So basically, while my daughter was in kindergarten, we were hearing a lot from the school about behavioral issues. And of course, the school employees didn't want to diagnose her. So they said, it's possible she has ADHD. So the first step, of course, was to call the pediatrician. I called the pediatrician. I explained my daughter's behavior and the issues that she was having at school. And when I say pass the buck, without hesitation, the pediatrician said, okay, you need to see a developmental pediatrician. So that was the first, that was the first pass the buck, so to speak. Let's see. So that was early 2022. We had our first appointment with a developmental pediatrician, and this was telehealth, mind you, June 2022. That's how long the wait. Right.
Wow. Can I pause for a second, because it has to do with this. I do remember special education when I was a child, but it seemed like it was more physical for a lot of it, or it was different types of, disabilities. Now, with neurodivergent children, I don't know, because we were blind to it, or has it really risen since we were children in the 80s and 90s? And my question that you don't have to answer now, but to ponder, is like, why is this happening now? Is it because we recognized it and there's a name to it now and there's some descriptions where we can do that? Or has our environmental, has environment impacted us? Has our lifestyle impacted us? Not saying we're to blame if we're the parent that births this child. This is the environment that we have to live with. But it is interesting to me that there's this huge rise. And
it's true.
And it's like, and we're not nurturing that. If this is really happening, what do we need to do to help our children? And also to help the children that are neurodivergent. Like, we need to up, these specialists. Hopefully there's more that come through that say, oh my God, there's a need for this. We need to have more of this. And maybe because it's become so prevalent the last 10 years, they're kind of playing catch up. I don't know. But can we pause and we'll go on with your story, but what are your thoughts on that as a parent going through this? What ran through your mind when you're like, you start meeting all these other parents and you're like, wow, I didn't know the community was so big and that I had to wait so long because there's so many kids. What's going on? Why are our children neurodivergent now, or have they always been? We just didn't know.
I think it's a combination of everything you just said. And the reason why I was starting to get all excited is because there is such a need for more of these specialists, because the wait lists are, they're way too long. Like, what our needs and our children's needs, we can't wait that long. It's just, I do think
yesterday, right? Yesterday is when it was supposed to happen.
Yeah. I mean, I think that there's been more research. And I just think that I do think that we're recognizing these things more. And that also could come from the educators, because I don't know if I would have recognized this as early as they did. So maybe the educators are being trained in those areas, and it's absolutely something that's been running through my mind. But I'm also grateful that we have been able to diagnose my daughter early, because on top of what you just said, there are so many adults now being diagnosed as neurodivergent.
Yeah, my uncle's one of them. He didn't get diagnosed till he was 50.
Wow.
So just imagine, we always knew, like, so smart and so many beautiful skills, and then there was always like a social cue, but it's how much relief will someone feel getting that news, knowing that, they knew or felt that something was, needing to be solved. Like there was an answer that needed to come and they didn't know what that was. So It's just so nice for some people to get this news and understand it so that they can accept and understand their life better and know what to do. But I'm so glad. Let's give one kudo to the school that they did diagnose. So let's start there. So there's that first step. I know there's room to grow. There's room to grow in everything, right? That's why this life is this life. So it's supporting that program. So let's go on. So you got so you finally got in 2022.
June 2022, and the developmental pediatrician was able to diagnose my daughter with ADHD. So we've had that diagnosis for over 2 years.
Okay.
And so she was able to give recommendations to the school for accommodations for ADHD. But as time went on, as my daughter went through first grade and then the first half of second grade, just those accommodations weren't enough. The school was noticing that, and we were noticing that she was still struggling with all of the same behaviors. So, and this also goes back to your question about where do you find the supports. So for a very long time, the only support we had was this developmental pediatrician. And I kept asking, like, should we start seeing a therapist? Like, what else should we be doing? And for a really long time, she wasn't really giving us that kind of direction, which was really frustrating. And the turning point was not this past summer, but last summer. So it was the summer before my daughter went into second grade. She was in camp.
2 years. 2 years.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, it was a year ago. So this was summer 2023.
Okay. So from diagnosis to that point was a year and a half?
Yeah.
Ish? Okay.
Yes. So my daughter was in camp, and we got a call saying that she had gotten incredibly dysregulated and that we had to pick her up. We had to take her home. So I immediately called the developmental pediatrician because I'm sorry, let me backtrack. A few months before, in spring 2023, the developmental pediatrician did recommend that my daughter start attending a social development group. And so she referred us to a specific place, and they're fantastic. She still attends sessions there, but once again, I first contacted them in early 2023. We did an intake, I think, in like March 2023, and then she started the social development group in April 2023. So any new support service, you have to bank on at least a few months.
Okay, so that's good for someone to know. Exactly. That's why I mentioned, the year and a half to this, to that. Right. Those time frames start to add up. So giving somebody an expectation of what to expect, which is why I love that you're on. This is what your goal is.
Yes,
so then she got into that, and then what happened? So she got into that,
and she's still doing that once a week, but it's expensive, and insurance doesn't cover a lot of it. That's a whole nother layer. Yeah. That's a whole nother layer that, when I always go back to the money issue.
So can I ask how much it is and what state this
certainly
is in?
I'm in New York,
and
a single group social development session is, actually it was $125, but starting in a couple of weeks, it's gone up to $130. And at least for the 125 sessions, our insurance only covered $35.
Oh God, that's gas to get you where you gotta go.
And as much as we love this social development group, and I'm working with them because, again, I got to keep talking about the money part of this.
No, this is a big deal. This is why some people might be so flustered and frustrated and scared that they feel like they have to have all this cash, because it's like, seems to be what gets you what you need.
Exactly. And this particular group, they do ask that you pay the entire semester up front, and starting this recently, and so I was doing that for a while, and I got into a hole, and I had to start asking them, I can't do that anymore. You have to work with me. I can't give you $1,300 up front. I can't do it.
Is that for the year? Or is that for just a few months? Like, how many times does she go?
Yeah, she goes weekly, and there are separate semesters. There's fall, winter, spring, and summer.
So $1,300 per session per season, pretty much.
Pretty much. It's a little cheaper in this. It's a little cheaper in the summer.
Okay.
Because the summer is shorter, and but so I'm talking about for the fall. Yeah, I'm
$1,300.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a lot of money.
So
and that's just one of the slices.
And that's just one of the slices, and they want it up front. It's it's not like I'm paying per session. They want everything up front. And because they are wonderful people and they're doing incredible things with my daughter, they are working with us, but they're a business. And like I said, an insurance only covers a small fraction. So that's a big part.
It's a huge part.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so going back, so summer 2023, when my daughter got really dysregulated at camp, that was when we realized that it was time to start considering medication. Okay. And so we've been doing that, and it has been a help. And it was at that time that I said to the developmental pediatrician, we really need to get her into individual therapy, because we still need help. And unfortunately, so this answers your question in the sense that I asked the developmental pediatrician for a referral, and she gave me like one recommendation, and I think they said, we don't take kids as young as your daughter. So then it fell to me to start doing my own research for an individual therapist. So my mom asked someone that she knew, and I asked my therapist for recommendations. So I had a list of about 8 practices that I had to start contacting, and it was all a question of who had availability sooner. Who several of them would not take kids as young as my daughter. So the practice that I ended up with, they basically gave me the earliest slot. That was how they, quote unquote, won. Because, and even still, I had to wait maybe a month or two before we had our first intake session. But the good news about this therapy practice is our therapist is phenomenal.
Great.
We love her. And we also love her because therapy costs a lot of money, and again, insurance was not covering enough, and she spoke to her boss and she lowered our price.
Oh man. See, that's what makes a difference when we can, like we said earlier, meet each other halfway, because we all have different situations. That's so wonderful. I'm like, when am I going to get a story like I was waiting for you to someone throw you a bone?
Exactly.
Wow.
And and they don't rent, and we pay per session.
Oh, that's good. Instead of upfront. That's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money.
God, why are people doing that? I mean,
yeah.
It's just, I understand, like you said, it's a business, and everyone has to make ends meet, but it's crazy to me that our society doesn't, help out with this. and it's just with everything else we help out with, this is one of the bigger things up front right now. We should be paying attention on how we can foster this and make it flourish for the children and for the families.
Exactly.
So from here,
yes.
Is this current? So she goes to the social camp?
Social development
camp, individual therapy.
Yeah.
And is there any other thing that she's doing, or are those the two main?
Those are the two main ones.
Okay, and you chose those because you felt those were the most helpful for her at the moment from the things they recommended.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Because it's interesting, because that's the thing, right? You're like, this is what we've got, and this is our options. What's going to be the best for my kid? And I think that's anyone listening, and you have that list in front of you right now, and you don't even know which one to pick. What would you say to them in like a couple sentences? If they're in that situation, like just something heartfelt where they can just hear this. If it's anything that you've said today, this part right here with someone literally crying, looking at that list in the middle of what you just went through the last few years.
Trust your gut. If it doesn't feel like it's right for you, then don't do it. There will be someone else. There will be someone else who can help your child. And that's something that I always have to remind myself, because her public school, everyone at her public school is wonderful. I adore them. They have nothing but her best interest at heart. But the person at the district who is the chairperson of the special education committee, there is no other word to describe this woman than odious. She has no empathy. She does not care for what parents or what children go through. And I've been calling her out on a lot of that, and she does not care. But what I have to remind myself is that everyone else has my daughter's best interest at heart.
100%.
And you will find those people. You will have to do your research and do what I'm doing. Talk about this, because that's the only way I've been able to find people who are in similar situations. I started talking about this on Instagram, and I found that this amazing therapist who I've interviewed on both my own podcast and in articles, she too has a neurodivergent child. So we're always talking about different ways that we can advocate for our child. Listening to podcasts, and that's how I found people like Luana. So trust yourself.
Because you were in one of your questions to me to ponder was, how lonely you feel at first, right? Like how lonely and isolated you feel with the situation because it's sitting so heavy and you feel like you're on an island in the middle of nowhere. So that's through true. So what you just listed, so through podcast, I assume there's social groups online you can find, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Have you made friends not just online but in person where you can be with moms that have similar situations? Because I love that we have the online community, especially if you live in a rural area like where I'm from. You know, it was hard to connect because you had limited resources and not that many people to have that diversity of having those meetups. But what are those things? Or those are a few? Do you feel like they help?
Well, so for me, when it comes to in-person people, I am optimistic that now we're going to be beginning the school year with in the IEP class. I will have a better opportunity to meet the parents of the kids in the integrated co-teaching class, because unfortunately because we started in April last year, it was really hard. Like I don't even think I was on the class list. Like I was never getting emails from the class parent. So because it's true, I feel very othered by the parents of the neurotypical kids. I definitely feel like that. And it's hard because, like you were saying before, unless you're in it, you can't truly understand what someone is going through. And you know, and that's fair. When
But that's why you ask, but I think people don't know how to approach it.
Exactly.
They don't know how to approach it. So anything that I've heard on this podcast, whether someone's lost their child or something, it's asking actually helps them heal, you know? Yeah. So maybe how can we encourage them to ask you? Maybe you can say, hey, ask me about my neurodivergent child. Come on up. The little chair and desk.
Well, you know, I've become really open about telling people about how my daughter is neurodivergent because I want them to understand her. And I also don't want them to look at her askance. I want them to fully understand her. And I think that previous generations everyone has been conditioned to just be like, no, we don't talk about it. Let's not talk about it. And I believe the opposite. I think that the more we share the truth about who we are, who our children are, I think that will help people get more comfortable. But you're right, because it's hard. My daughter has one friend who was briefly in the integrated co-teaching class with her in second grade, but she's not in it, at least not now, for the beginning of third grade. And I actually wasn't sure if it was because the child was neurodivergent or if she needed academic help. And eventually I just asked the mother flat out because she kept asking me for advice. And I realized, well, I can't help her if I don't have all of the facts.
Yeah, because people were sensitive to ask that personal question, you know, because people think you're stepping on people's toes, and maybe for some it is, but for some it's like, I want to talk about this, and this is what I've gone through. Let's help each other out. I think I'd say 85% of us feel that way. Like, let's talk about it. Let's help each other out. You know, it's personality based.
Definitely.
That's good. I also wanted to ask this.
Yeah.
So I know that, a lot of parents, you know, are like, oh, you know, there's some disruptive kids, or this is like not a good school district because, you know, people only score this because there's so many of these kind of kids and these kind of kids.
Yeah.
Do you feel like there's a prejudice with neurodivergent children being in the classroom because they feel other parents that don't, if they have neurotypical children, feel like they're taking attention away from the teacher or they're disruptive? Do you feel like there's that rub? Have you felt that?
I have felt that only in the sense that when my daughter was in the second grade mainstream class, the way that the teacher just kept saying, I always have to call in for reinforcements. And that's frustrating because, of course, my response to that would be, well, why can't the special education committee just provide a one-on-one aid so you don't feel that sense of overwhelm? And so I did feel that way, but at the same time, I do want my daughter to get all of the support that she needs, which is different than what neurotypical kids need. I will say the only rub that I've ever experienced, I've experienced it twice with my daughter. And so that's why I always really want to make sure that I talk about how incredible our therapist has been and how incredible our dance studio has been, because as the dance year was wrapping up back in the spring, I was talking to the owners of the dance studio because I was getting a little worried. I was like, you know, I know my daughter isn't as tight as everyone else, and she doesn't always follow along. Sometimes she's off in her own world. And I was like, are they going to, you know, ask her to leave? Are they going to want to keep her with younger kids? And I brought that up, and I was, you know, I was like, can she continue on? Because I was debating, should I pull her out of the dance school? And the owner looked at me and he said, I think that would be a tremendous shame if you did that. And I was like, oh my God, thank
That's
you.
the answer the answer above you wanted.
Exactly. I mean, it is about finding the right places.
It's about your community, right?
It's finding the right community. That dance studio, they are all about acceptance and inclusivity. Unfortunately, 2 years earlier, when my daughter was doing gymnastics and she hadn't been diagnosed yet, it was the polar opposite. They were just like, is she in school? You know, it's really an issue for safety. Like, they were pulling me aside to talk to me after every single session. And then when I finally decided to take her out, they're like, yeah, we think that's the right decision. And I was like,
yeah.
Fuck you.
Yeah, that's a hard thing for someone to say about somebody you love. And it's like, well, more like, where are you not giving that this child doesn't care what you're teaching? You know what I mean?
Exactly.
It's like, that's just in general, like when that happens as a business or as a community, it's like, well, why isn't that? It's hard. I know it's hard to give all the flavors to everyone in this world because we're all different and it doesn't matter if you're diagnosed or not, but there's something to be said about
absolutely.
that.
And the
especially
only
something physical like that, you know?
Yeah. And there was one other incident that happened earlier this year that, I mean, I can't prove anything, but because knowing that my child is neurodivergent, you do have to wonder. I was asking one of the troop leaders of Girl Scouts about enrolling my daughter, and she was very quick to say, we're full. And so I can't be sure. That may very well be true. But I was like, are you?
Yeah, it's hard not to feel that. It's hard not to feel that because I feel like when you go into a situation, you feel judged already, probably.
Exactly.
You know,
exactly.
So I think that's pretty normal.
Yeah.
So I think maybe you can just say my daughter's fucking amazing. And fuck y'all if you want her or not, because she's gonna be just an amazing bonus because she has, you know, this special gift, and she does. You know,
totally.
We're all packed with some cool stuff, and she's gonna really shine. I could tell.
Well, you know what I did.
Got a good mama.
As soon as that woman said that to me, she's like really high up in the PTA. I not all PTA moms, but a lot of PTA moms are our version of mean girls. That's what I think. And so, but the second she said that to me, and it's a real shame because her daughter and my daughter are friends. Her daughter loves my daughter. So as soon as she said that to me, I immediately turned back to my phone, and she's like, well, if a spot opens up, I'll let you know. And I just looked at her. I was like, I'm good. Thanks. Goodbye. Like, I immediately just did not let her think that she held that over me. And you're right. We're going to be showing with every passing day that my daughter is fucking awesome.
Yeah.
And yeah.
You know, in this world, do we, like, because you put on here, you know, that there's these round holes, you know, and trying to fit in a square peg. And it's like, in a way, all of us were trying to do that, whether we were neurodivergent or not. So, like, it was hard for us to be like, sit there and do, and you know what I mean? And it's like, fuck those holes. Be a star, be a diamond.
Exactly. I mean, this is totally me projecting because my entire childhood, all I wanted to do was fit in. And now I look back at, you know,
we all
and
did,
I'm like,
you know?
Why?
I know, you know, we all do. And sometimes, like, that's why middle age is so awesome. Like,
yeah, right?
Like, you could fart at a store and be like, fuck it, I don't care. Like, I had a fart. You know, like, you don't care anymore. So it's just life, you know, and it's because we're trying to figure out where we fit. You know, like, there is a fitting, you do want to be accepted and loved, and that's normal, but it's like, you know, at the same time, it's like, if you're cool, then you're going to attract the people who love you genuinely. So fuck everybody else. Fuck everybody else.
I love being in my out of fucks to give era.
Exactly. I'm loving it too. Well, so from here, I'd like to just kind of, we're getting at the point where we're closing. So if someone has been, someone's child or just anyone listening, it can be adult that's even been recently diagnosed. Is there any last words of advice you'd like to give them before we go to our last 3 questions I ask everybody?
Okay. Yeah, no problem. Like I said before, just trust your gut. You know, I always tell people you have to do what's right for you, and your people are out there. It might take a little while to find them, but it's cliche, you are not alone. And I will say there is a robust neurodivergent community on Threads that I've recently discovered. So I say check out Threads. Come follow me on Threads and on Instagram, because I'm always talking about my daughter, and I'm always talking about what it's like as the parent of a neurodivergent child, because not because I'm complaining, but because this is what my life is, and it's raw and it gets messy, and I think that we can all feel better about who we are if we just share our experiences.
Yeah, have an outlet.
Exactly.
You know, have an outlet for it so that it doesn't end up just in here, in yourself. Let it go.
Exactly.
That's great advice. And I just wanted to recap, you know, those listening, it seems like any diagnosis in our life, whether it be, you know, cancer or a lot of these, you know, or being a neurotypical person, it seems like if you take your time and know that time has to be taken for you to find your right team, to give yourself that grace that it might not be tomorrow or a week from now, but just like Sarene did, she's found her people, one person, one therapist, one school at a time, and that you will find the genuine help that your heart needs and your soul, whatever you believe, energy.
Absolutely.
Thank you for that piece of advice. I will be putting all your information that you want shared on our show notes, so anyone listening can go to the show notes of the show and follow Sarene and just get more information from her, just like she hooked up with Luann that we had on our podcast, and you can hook up with her too, and maybe even Luana, so we'll see how that rolls. But so we'll end with our last 3 questions, and they're meant to be answered in 1 minute or less, and some people can do it, and sometimes it's hard. So here we go. So the first one is, what are you unpacking right now in your life? So what are you, like a theme in your life that you keep learning, you keep striving to, I don't want to say overcome, but just work through?
I am currently working through the next phase of my career, actually. I am a writer. I am a professional writer. That is something that is not going to change. But I had a rough few months career-wise. So that is something, and like I said, you know, we're talking about money and about how much support services for my daughter cost. So that's what I'm rethinking, reevaluating my approach, things like that. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, that is something we do, reinvent ourselves in the middle of our life. It's pretty interesting.
And this is for like the zillionth time.
Oh yeah. We're not the careers we used to have, you know, 20 years ago where it was forever, right? This is different times. Totally. Thank you for sharing that and being vulnerable. Sure. Second question is, who or what inspires you?
Oh,
I know, big one.
Well, my daughter, because I had this idealistic outlook when she was first born. I named her after Wonder Woman because I wanted her to be empowered in a way that I never felt that I was when I was a child. And again, I'm not blaming my parents. That was just how I felt. And this was in no way what I expected motherhood to be like. So I'm learning from her every day. And that is something that, and I just say this because of how different generations were raised and how they looked upon their children. I think it's so important that we try to learn from our children. I do not succeed at it all the time, but she's my roadmap for how I can be the best parent.
Yeah. Best person too, your best version of yourself. That's really good. Yeah. And then the last question is, what lesson have you learned recently that's really helped you through life?
Oh my.
I know there's a lot, or you have to sift through them.
Yeah. Well, for me, it kind of goes back to the first question of, you know, I'm not making any grand announcements right now, but I was hoping that maybe I could just be an independent freelance writer, running solopreneur. And that may not be what I ultimately end up doing, because life is not exactly what I had initially planned, and there are things that need to be taken care of, and I am reconsidering a full-time position. Yeah.
Well, now there's things you want to provide, for your daughter, so it's all in good heart.
Exactly.
It's all in good heart. Well,
Exactly.
I know it's accepting something that wasn't your vision, but hey, you don't know what will come from this. There'll be some good connections to be
It is
made.
not a bad thing at all. I had a first interview for something that, hey, even if that doesn't work out, that's something I think I would be very happy doing.
Good.
So I'll
That's
leave it at
even
that.
better.
So
Even better.
so I'm just saying to myself, you know what? Look for those kinds of opportunities.
100%. Have joy in the time you're going to spend there, for sure.
Exactly.
Well, what a pleasure having you. I really appreciate that you reached out to me. It means a lot. And I'm glad we were able to further a conversation that was seeded by Luana. And I appreciate you very much for being vulnerable and sharing a story that has impacted your life and has, you're still going for it every day. Makes you has its challenges and rewards every day. So thank you for being on today, Sarene.
Thank you so much for having me on, Vanessa. I'm thrilled that this worked out because, like I said, I've been a fan of the podcast for a while now.
Thank you so much.
Would it suck if you didn't have this podcast around? Well, by having your support, it can stay on. There are bills to pay, motherfuckers. If you're listening on Spotify, click the About title on our podcast page, and then you'll see the underlying support link. Monthly contributions range from 99 cents to $9.99 a month. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, scroll down the episode you just listened to and click on https://patreon.com and hit membership. Your support goes a long ways. Thank you so much for listening, and pass this on, this episode, this whole podcast, to somebody you think that would enjoy it. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.